Thank you, everyone, and good morning. Please welcome the real people to the stage. So we've got Peter Maynard. You can sit. Darren Hopkins. No, I'm going to stand. The way you prefer it. Danielle Pentony and Ryan Coe. So this topic of small to medium-sized business and standards, it's one that a few have probably got questions around. So I'm going to be asking those questions, but we'll have some time at the end for some Q&A, hopefully, if Peter doesn't go over on some questions. So we'll cut him off if required. That's why he's sitting closest to me. I can't put my hand across his mouth if he goes too far. So first of all, standards. Now I'm going to ask a question and get a temperature check in the room after this one, but standards, the SMB 1001, I'll go to Ryan and Peter first on this one. How did it come about and how is it made up? So, Ryan, if you want to kick off.
Yeah, thanks. So, SMB 1001 was actually a concept that was started by Peter, and then I met Peter a few years ago, and then it was a multi-tier concept where we have 5 levels. We call them the training wheels or the colored belts below the black belt, and the goal is basically from Peter's lived experience as a MSP and also as a small and medium business owner. He wanted something that works pretty much for all different small and medium businesses. So the concept was, okay, we have these 5 levels. We can actually help them to ultimately adopt the common frameworks, because underneath the common frameworks and the standards in the world, we don't have a lot of guidance right there. And a lot of the different small and medium businesses don't know how to start. When I met Peter, we talked about developing a standard. I had about 15 years of ISO editing experience. Personally, I experienced a lot of frustrations writing ISO standards because each standard takes about 6 years to be refreshed. And so I proposed the term dynamic standards to Peter and say, hey, why don't we make this a dynamic standard? So what's a dynamic standard? It's a standard that's basically runs and gets refreshed every year. And this is unheard of in, for example, in ISO or ITU, because you need a lot of consensus across different countries, and it's really hard to pace with the challenges of cyber threats. And we thought dynamic standards, okay, let's do it. And we published CSCAU at the time, dynamic standards, SMB 1001, with the hope that this will be the first dynamic standard that we publish. Now we are now rebranded and we've internationalized as Dynamic Standards International. Our hope is that we'll be able to produce more dynamic standards along the way that pace with the technological changes of the realities that we are facing right now.
Yeah, Pete, that leads in well to your part. So just give us a bit of an idea of what this mix is and how it works, because we know 98.3% of businesses in Australia are 20 people or less, so it's the backbone of the economy here and elsewhere in the world. So how is that made up, or how have you come to get this standard to be that suitable for SMEs?
Yeah, thanks. That was a great intro from Ryan. I think that
Well done, Ryan.
Yeah, absolutely. The challenge of running a small business is very real, and for anyone that's run one, there's many competing pressures. I think the most important thing that we have to accept now, that any business really is a technology business in some way, shape or form. So the need to have appropriate cybersecurity measures is becoming just a fundamental requirement of business. But what I had observed in the 4 to 5 years before we got to the certification of the standard was just a fundamental lack of engagement. And it didn't matter how we put it in front of small business. We'd be told something and then the action never really followed up, and then there was competing messages with who their IT provider was and their MSP provider, and they were still on the journey themselves. So what became obvious to me was that there hadn't actually ever been a standard written for small business. This is a new and emerging risk, as we all know, and what we've had to work with have typically been produced for large enterprise or for government, and they've tried to be fitted down or reduced down to be made fit for purpose for a small business. And if anyone's been in a meeting with me with government, we diametrically oppose each other. We just operate very differently, and small business is no different than enterprise. One of the recent conversations I had with one of the leading guys from CompTIA when he came to Australia was that Australians just don't get risk. And I have to agree, we're not at the point yet where as a whole nation we're dealing with risk at a managed level. So the first product that I put in front of a small business was actually a hybrid maturity assessment, which was designed, it was a hybrid maturity assessment made up of NIST, CSF, the CIS controls, COVID-5, ISO 27001, and the Essential 8. And I produced this with my mentor at the United States in 2017. And that was made for a small business market. But very quickly I discovered that in front of the small business market in Australia was still way, way apart. And what it finally came to was, the thing that we would hear constantly is, we want to be good, we want to do better, but show us what good looks like and tell us what that needs to be and where do we need to start, what are the priorities. So that was also a bit of a light bulb moment, that security and cybersecurity doesn't need to be binary. It's not good or bad. And if we talk about a journey, then our standards have to absolutely represent a journey. And at the moment, we don't really have that. You're either certified or you're not to the ISO standard. So I think the biggest innovation that the standard brings is the bronze level, is the entry point, is that starting point that the florist or the baker or the catering company can actually make a start on improving their cybersecurity. But most importantly, it's aligned to an MSP provider that knows what needs to be delivered so that business can get the business outcome it needs. That business outcome may not be an uplift in cybersecurity. It may actually be the ability to demonstrate that they've done something with that, and that's where the certification comes in. So the standard really helps align both industry, the MSPs that will ultimately be the cybersecurity guardians for the overwhelming majority of Australian businesses. It gives them something to work to and align to, take their clients on a journey, so that there's harmonisation around the country and around the globe for that. But also it gives a clear and transparent pathway for that small business, that they're not being sold something. That was one thing that I would constantly see in their maturity reports. It was 8 sectors and there was a massive overinvestment in preparing to protect. It was absolutely barren land in response and recovery. And I said, why would that be the case? And then when I look back at what the Australian situation was, the guidance that we're getting here never ever addressed the fact that you might actually get caught, you might actually be involved in an incident. So we weren't ever being told about, you need an incident response plan, you need to know who to call in that event. So Australians were overly focused on protecting without the realisation that protection may not be enough. And when we hear the stats, we know that's empirically proven now. 87%, I think, or thereabouts, of small businesses have already been involved in a ransomware attack and had no guidance of where to go at the end of that.
Now, before you go too statty, I'm going to actually bring, thanks for Darren in here, because from McGrath-Nicol, they have done some reports on this now.
His stats are accurate.
Before he gives these accurate stats, I just want to get a show of hands in the room of who here is actually MSPs or MSSPs in the room here. Yeah, so it's a fair chunk. So this is, and who's actually looked at, or of those people, the SMB 1001 already, or has actually started to apply. So that's great. So I think, Darren, if you want to just run through some of the stuff, especially around ransomware, and especially with some of the changes from a government level, just for the audience.
Thank you. Yeah, look, your stat was completely wrong, Pete, so I'll deal with that. I'm coming, I guess, from an incident response perspective. So, to Peter's point, no one really wants to actually go through the event. We're about preparing and avoiding, but at some point you may actually have to go through that. And 4 years ago, we started a piece of research with YouGov, which was actually trying to understand why Australian businesses were paying ransoms far too often and falling victim to these attacks, and we try to understand the psyche behind some of the decisions that were being made. Today we actually launched our 4th annual ransomware report, and this year it's that the statistics are a little bit concerning, because we've actually gone back to when we started in 2022. We were seeing quite significantly high results around victims and payments and timing around those things. But the last few years though, what we saw was this really nice reduction in in those stats. It felt like businesses were improving and we were becoming better prepared and maybe making better decisions. This year, we've got all-time highs across the board. And we specifically try to make sure that we look at a cross-section of all Australian businesses. The report's not about enterprise or big end of town or those that can afford a big insurance policy or have a negotiator giving stats. We deliberately wanted to cover SMBs, SMEs, medium and large enterprise. And the statistics are done in a balanced way that tries to actually take into account how many of those businesses sit in each of those sectors, and we then break it down. And without a doubt, the SME, SMB sector is hit the hardest and most often, and the stats show that are more likely to take a route of payment to recover rather than being prepared to respond and recover. And this year what we've got is, over the last 5 years, so we asked everyone, over the last 5 years, have you been a victim of a ransomware event? And we've even asked them about other types of events. You see like business email compromise, and 69% of that survey group said, yes, we have had an event, which is hugely high. And then we got down to some of the discussions and the questions around, well, what did you do? Did you pay? What was the outcomes? 84% this year said that if we fell victim and we paid. And the average payment has gone up from last year, which was just over $1 million across the board, which was large, up to 1.35 this year. So we've got this spike again of what we're willing to pay. And the more concerning stats that I saw were, we asked all the businesses that didn't fall victim, okay, well, you haven't fallen, great. If you did, what would you do? The vast majority said we would probably pay, and they were willing to pay more than the average. 1.42 million is what the survey suggests that we're willing to pay an overseas organised crime group to go through. And the last change that I really noticed this year is I always want to know why. What's the psyche behind why you think that this needs to happen? Last year we were convincing ourselves that if we make a payment, we're going to minimise harm to others. So we're making a moral decision around, if I pay, look, I've lost someone's data, I've had this incident, the right thing to do is to minimise any further harm on the back of what's happened to me. And we convince ourselves that paying and making sure the data doesn't get leaked on the dark web and there's not this big public issue and people have to go through an identity recovery piece is the right thing to do. And if I'm being asked to pay a little bit of money, that's an outcome. And often they're insured for it. And the fact that your insurance may cover that payment sort of legitimises that process as well. And that's what we were doing this year. That's still just as high. But what we've seen is that a lot of the victims are also paying because their business is so badly interrupted and disrupted that they've got no choice but to make a payment because they're not ready to respond and recover to what's happened. And that feels to be their only way out. And this country is a fantastic target for overseas groups because the likelihood of hitting an Australian company and getting through is high. And even more so, if you do get through, the likelihood of someone actually making a payment is really high. And if you're looking at an average of $1 million plus each time, that's a great business to be in.
Payday, isn't it? So Danielle, as part of what we do, if you go see dsi.org, you'll see that we have a steering committee, which Danielle was also a part of, obviously Australian Digital Health Agency, and in that sector, I'd love to hear, Danielle, from you. I mean, you see this year at the front line, it's a very heavily focused and attacked area. What have you seen from your involvement with the standard and how you can see it making some improvement in the industry?
So first things first, I think whichever industry you're in, it's a realization that you're part of this large ecosystem. That's something that impacts one area can impact the other, and that's why I think this standard is probably the one that will uplift what's happening in the sector. And so when it comes to healthcare. So if you looked at this, whether it is your GP, your pharmacy, or just from an allied health perspective, if one of them got, there was a cyber attack, would they be able to recover? Would they be able to have that continuity of care that is most important for the community? And so when you looked at it from, if you take a step back and move away from the more metro areas to smaller areas, if you looked at that would be a massive impact to the community because you can't get care there. So in terms of what we're doing is with our Cyber Champions program, we've use this as a mechanism to help people who come to the Cyber Champions program and who attend the Cyber Champions program to do that self-assessment, to help them understand what's their journey like, and it's to help them, basically it's like a mirror. It's not like, where you are and where you propose to be. And I think the other thing is also, as time goes on, is also not just looking at a particular sector, but sort of launching that across. Like, for example, looking at what your IT service providers, because at the end of the day, some of these small and medium businesses, don't understand what exactly the standard could be. So expanding it to cover your IT service providers as well.
Yeah, and I think there is, I did a talk a couple of weeks ago for SMB IT, and Wayne will be here in the room today, but one of the things they're looking to do is to get their members to be sort of certified at that gold level before they go and put that out there. So, as an MSP, getting yourself up to that standard as quickly as possible, and then putting that out through the market is something, we really should be pushing for, because this is a gaping hole, and, because of the major attacks we had a few years back, the amount of data that's out there about Australians and Australian businesses is ultra high, so we need to do something. So this was something that, Claire O'Neill was sort of speaking about when she was Minister, about having a cyber health check. And that was the path we were going down, to sort of follow that alignment, when we sort of first started. But the interest, Ryan, from overseas has been massive, hasn't it? From places like Singapore and other parts as well.
Yeah, so Singapore's cybersecurity agency has joined the steering committee as well just last week, and we're working towards a mutual recognition agreement. And this is a great milestone for us, because in Singapore, we have they have the Cyber Essentials and Cyber Trust Mark, and people who are certified against that can then have a mutual recognition where, it's kind of like if you've done 70% of this, the 70% over there can be recognized over here as well. So this is a great international alignment. We've got interest across the Pacific as well, especially from Paxon, a DFAT-funded network of 17 nations around the South Pacific, especially from Vanuatu, where they're looking to roll out the SMB 1001 into some of the sovereign entities relating, for example, the Provident Fund and Central Bank. And also, we've got New Zealand coming on board, which is growing in interest. So we are starting to, internationalize this. In America as well, we are starting to see interest as well. So this is really encouraging.
Yeah, and Pete, just gives an example, like the entry level. So we're talking $95 to come in at that entry level, the bronze you mentioned, because a lot of businesses don't know where to start.
Yeah.
Just give us some basics on how that sort of happens. How do you get into it, and actually how does it start that pathway?
Yeah, fantastic. So requirement number one of the standard was that an organisation have access to a technical support specialist or IT provider or MSP provider that could assist them with understanding and implementing the standard for their business. So that always seemed to be one that was really necessary, to have that higher level of assurance that these controls are being implemented properly. Having a firewall is one thing, but ensuring that it's actually being configured correctly is probably more important. And I remember seeing on insurance questionnaires, do you have a firewall? And there was never any questions further around that as to how it was configured or whether the configuration had been evaluated. So having the things themselves aren't enough, but they are the basic controls, and they're things like having a firewall, having antivirus. One of the hotly contested requirements in the bronze level has been a requirement to change passwords. And as you're all aware, there's been some changes at the NIST level and other frameworks and standards around the need to no longer having the need to deprecate passwords. That's exactly the role of the steering committee. It will decide whether or not that control stays, or whether there's an opportunity to amalgamate other controls so that something can be deprecated. The concept behind what's been made is that it must have empathy for who the customer is, and the customer is a small business. It must always remain focused on that as the core objective, helping that small business stay secure. So ensuring that they're controls that are fit for purpose, that have high return on investment for both the effort to install them and to acquire them is a prerequisite. As one moves up the tiered scales, consider level 1 or bronze as, if you don't have this, you're fundamentally not engaged in cybersecurity. And from a supply chain perspective, it's a real clear indicator to a prime or to a government or to a large organisation that if an organisation's not prepared to step up, invest $95 in the security of their information and their partners, and have these basic controls in place, then there's grounds to say that we probably shouldn't trade with you. By the time you move to level 2, the silver level, most organisations that are under the care of an MSP or an IT provider would have most of the controls that exist inside that layer. Where SMB 1001 is unique in its approach, and it's because of that empathy for that small business customer, is the control in there to introduce a policy to reduce the impact of invoice fraud. From the bit that I know, the last 7 years, the number one financial crime has been business email compromise, which leads to invoice fraud, which to a small business isn't particularly worried about the loss of information or integrity. The one that affects them the most is availability. And the paying an invoice, whether it be $50,000 or $100,000 to the wrong supplier, having to go and make that money again and pay the right supplier, is likely a business-ending event. So we would like to think that at silver level, you've got enough in place to make that business hard and more secure that a bad actor will move on. But by the time you get to gold level, level 3, you've introduced a holistic people, process, technology approach to managing cyber risk in a small business context, and one in which they can manage comfortably themselves with the assistance of the MSP. There's two things that need to happen here. We need to lift the engagement rate and the resilience and the maturity of small businesses, but we also need to try and help those thousands of MSP and IT providers graduate into being MSSPs, so they can provide that holistic risk solution. When I first started back in 2015 coming into cyber, I had on our blueprint that I thought accountants would be doing this. I thought accountants would have seen the opportunity in managing risk for their clients and doing that. But it hasn't really happened down at that smaller level, so if that's not going to be the way, then it'll be the IT providers that will do it.
Yeah, and you know, Darren, you got obviously your business up to gold fairly quickly, and you've handheld a few people through it now. How have you found the process? You know, just from going through and the difference that it's made and opportunities opened up for both you and the business.
Yeah, look, we're talking about a small business framework here, standard. It goes beyond that, to be honest. You know, there's 5 tiers here. The level 3 tier, which is the gold, which is, you know, one of the great things that a lot of businesses like with this standard is that it's self-attestation up to that level. So there's a simplicity in that you've got to do the right things, and as a director or an owner, you have to attest to have done them, but you're not having this external audit piece coming through that slows and delays and adds cost to the process. At level 3, we're a firm that's ISO 27001 certified. A lot of our clients expected that of us. The banking clients we use expected that of us. So we've gone through that process. There were still some learnings at level 3 for us that we looked at and said, that's really good. We will make some changes to processes or whatever else, and we'll go down that standard. We're definitely looking for 4 and 5, because if you can go as a more mature business, so I see us sitting in the middle of that range. We're not an SMB, we're not a large enterprise, but in that middle space, level 5 there's a lot of maturity in the standard, quite a lot of maturity. It takes into account the things that Australia loves, like the Essential 8. They're built into the framework in an effective way. We do love it. It does take a lot of those NIST and ISO controls and brings them in as well. But the way it's tiered is that it brings you through those components slowly. And even something as simple as MFA, as you move up the tiers, the standard expects you to do things bigger and better as you move up, as you can accomplish those things, and your technology is adapted. So for us, it was a no-brainer. I'm on the steering committee as well, so I'm a fanboy and advocate for the standard. I clearly say that, but it's because I see so much benefit to a large part of this country's businesses to do something.
Yeah, I think the ease of application, I think, you know, obviously chairing the steering committee and having Danielle, and I think from my point of view, I've never been on a steering committee where it was that easy to get things through, you know, and we had a broad church of people that were involved in it as well. And I think to get anything across the line, you need to have the whole community involved. So, you know, AISA on there, we had ACS, we had ASD, you know, Home Affairs, we had everyone pretty much there. So when you put this standard out there, there's not really anyone that can sort of sit back and say, and sort of plot it and say, we weren't involved in that, so therefore we don't accept that to be a standard. And Danielle, from your point of view, did you find the same? Like, I mean, the feedback, you were great at the feedback, Darren also, but just the way it sort of ran, by the time we got to the end, before we were releasing, I couldn't believe we had about 3 items on the list that, no one was really fighting over. It was just basically, are we agreeing on these or not? And it was through. It was, how did you find the process for that side?
Well, I found the process, I think that, because you've got a broad range of industries, like everybody was bringing that expertise into the conversation. So every industry is different. And obviously when it comes to a standard or something like that, there's no one size, sort of fits all approach. But with this one, obviously, what we try to arrive at is a standard that helps everybody to achieve that maturity in incremental steps. It's not like, as soon as you start off, you go in and you just aim for the stars, but it's like small steps for organizations to do. So whether you're just an organization that's, has only 5 people working for you, or whether you've got, 500, it still means that these standards are coming from a place from lived experience actually. So, different people bringing that experience from what they're seeing in the sector to help shape the standards.
Yeah, and for Ryan and Pete, where do you see this going next? Like we've sort of gone obviously from the start of this month to an international standard, right? Yes. And that's exciting to a degree, but where are we going? I mean, the good thing is we do get feedback and we can take feedback on from the people using it, which, and having that dynamic standard, it doesn't just sit there stale. It is moving pretty quickly. What do you see the next stages of this?
So the current version of SMB 1001 is a 2025 version. It's a second version. So we tested the dynamic nature of the inputs from the steering committee experts and also their own communities. So it's not just restricted to steering committee members. Feedback is also welcome from the communities as well. And then we filter them down to a very efficient way of how do we organize the feedback in a way that's easily accessible by everyone on the steering committee to discuss about whether this, and there is a simplicity in mind where in SMB 1001 we only have 36 controls, which are progressively gained. So if you've done something in the lower levels, you don't have to redo them again, but you progress in the maturity of things. And then also at the same time, this is compared to say, the close to 100 controls in ISO 27001, for example, or the 50-something steps for making a standard in ISO as compared to this, where we only have 3 steps. Yeah, so we simplified just to the core because there's an audience there. Where to from here, we are now internationalizing the standardization, plus, so we've set up shop in Washington, DC, in Geneva and in Singapore. We are now increasing the representation from international players, very influential people from the EMEA, Europe, Middle East and Africa region, and the Americas region, and also in Asia, with the Singapore Cybersecurity Agency as one of the first to join. We'll be announcing a few more in the coming weeks. Certification will also be internationalized as well. This is where we are also taking on board, not just more people to be certified, but also more people who can help to implement these standards and also do the external audits for the levels 4 and 5. We call them the Independent Verification Organizations, IVOs. If you're interested, you can drop by and just have a chat with us. Peter or I will be able to help you with that.
Yeah, and I'm going to throw to Pete, and also just there is a microphone over here and over here. If anyone wants to ask any questions, I'll open it up so that just line up there and I'll sort of point out people there. But Pete, to get started, to get involved, before we get any questions, if anyone's got any other questions, but what's the easiest way to get started?
I think familiarise yourself with the standard, and it absolutely has been built for everyone in this room from a business growth perspective as well. It's intended to make it easier for you to access the SMB market, which I have found it empirically very, very difficult to do. And I'm a career entrepreneur. I've worked for myself my entire life. Range of IT businesses and software development firms, and nothing even comes close to how difficult cybersecurity has been with the SMB market in Australia. yet nothing's been more important. That's why I haven't moved away from it, that it's a job that needed to be done, and one that Australia could lead the world in. Familiarise yourself with the standard, understand the controls, and that you've all got the skill set to be able to be delivering the services that are the requirements in that standard. Consider DSI as the source of truth organisation. That's where the standard is managed by an industry steering committee. It's where it's overseen by a group of standard experts to make sure that it aligns with ISO practices. I've learned a lot on this journey, and there's another company involved as well called CyberCert. CyberCert's what's known as a conformity assessment body, and that's an organisation that's responsible for certifying businesses against the standard. So from a practitioner level, if you're interested in rolling this out in your business, please visit the CyberCert website, and you can access a partner program there. It's free. We've provided all the tools that you need to be able to do quick and easy gap assessments of your entire client base against any level of the standard. You'll be able to see immediately what requirements they're missing. It gives you discounts so that you can provide discounted subscription offerings to your clients. It's designed to help break open the gates of your engagement with a client base and really start to create some meaningful resilience building with them.
And no one's at the microphone, so I'm just going to go for the final thoughts through the panel here. Have we got anyone? Oh, do you want to just step up to the microphone, mate? Thank you. Just straight up here, straight ahead.
Thank you. Often we see SMBs that we feel that maybe cost is a barrier. One of the kind of things that I've observed is, let's say there's an SMB, they may be handling, say, sensitive data, and one of the key controls is around data leakage prevention, and we know that to try and get data leakage prevention working for an SMB could be very costly. So you obviously have to look at other compensating controls, or the other key one is around, say, vulnerability management. I'm just wanted to ask, doesn't the standard also include like these type of controls around DLP and, say, vulnerability management?
So I think when we look at the cost factor is really a major part. That this is why level 1 certification starts at $95. As Pete always says, it's a very generous family-size KFC meal. So this is, but the reason why we mark level 1 at $95 is because there's an ASD report that says that most of the small and medium businesses are only willing to spend no more than $500 on cybersecurity solutions. So this is the reality that we are seeing there. The other challenge that we have when we are trying to write that standard out, things like DLP and some of the other technologies, we try to get the essence of the technology and make the control very prescriptive without sounding like it is an unachievable technical term. So this is something that we do consider, and we always welcome, it's a great question you have. We welcome your feedback to just submit to our website, and we would welcome that. And that's the nature of the dynamic standards. Now, every year, in fact, every second we have new malware. There's 4 new unique malware globally every second. So hundreds have emerged in the last few minutes. There's no way we can actually pace with new technology. Next moment we would have that. If we do it in 6 years, it's impossible. But now we're trying to do it in the one year period. I was very encouraged when we see the cyber threat landscape report by the ASD as well, and also the McGraw-Nichols ransomware report. This gives us a very good on-the-ground kind of realistic view of what's actually the threats out there, and then we can then generate the controls to address that directly. It goes beyond a certain specific technology. When we talk about if you're on the steering committee, you will enjoy the conversations because we have a people, process, and technology viewpoint. And in my own academic research, I believe the frontiers of the future of cyber is actually in the people and process part, because there's not much technology or research or work done in that area. If the standards are able to address this people and process gap, I think we have addressed a major thing.
Yeah, I think the other thing is too that where this helps as an MSP is that you basically are able to map it against something that you're not recommending something to a client saying you need to do this, and we're recommending you do this, and then the person can take that as, are you just trying to make some money out of me? Well, I've got something over here that we've filled in, almost like doing a health check on an individual where they say how much they drink, how much exercise they do, etc., and then you can make recommendations off the back of that. So it almost puts a firewall in there to actually say, this is the gap, this is what's recommended, and this is best practice, and that sort of way too. So it does sort of, and for a low entry cost, we're trying to make it as approachable as possible. And as we all know in this room in cybersecurity, that's a challenging act to balance, right? So
yeah, and our goal is just a couple more sentences. Our goal is basically to encourage the director or the key stakeholder of the organization to look at the control and have a question in their brain and ask that same question to the IT provider or the IT person in the responsible. How can I do data leakage protection or prevention?
Yep.
And this is when the expert comes in and gets on the journey with this, the leader of the organization. And that's the beautiful process that's done every year.
Yeah. Now we've got two more questions. I think we've got about 3 minutes, so please come forward.
So one of the market advantages of small businesses is that they're agile, they can change on the fly. So I guess my question is two parts. First part is, once they pay the $95 and they got an expert to come in and give their certification, what happens when things change? And is there any provision in SMB 1001 that when they, let's say, want to change the MSP or thing where they want to compete on price, save and cost, is there any way for SMB to ensure that the knowledge that they've done with that first $95 they spend is now not walking away with the ISP out that door and now they have to start from scratch again?
I'm happy to answer
Yeah.
that. The first question, sort of crossing over into CyberCert land, where CyberCert adds value to the standard process. Just refresh the first part of the question for me.
So it's sort of like if they've got someone that they've used an MSP,
Yep.
and they've actually gone and done the certification, paid $95, but they just decide.
And the changes, absolutely. So the fact that things will change throughout the year is a given. Whether you're ISO IEC 27001 certified, SOC 2 certified, or SMB 1001 certified. One of the most important aspects of SMB 1001 was that it was a standard that could take into consideration introduction of new technologies. So things will change. We want businesses to move away from using passwords to passwordless technology. At the moment, you'll see passwordless technology is a requirement level 5, but because of the advancements and the availability of it becoming more ubiquitous, it will move down and become available a lot quicker. So change is expected, and that's one of the unique value propositions that SMB 1001 offers that other standards don't. And that's one of the reasons why an agile standards authority is one best suited to manage a risk that moves and changes as quickly as it does. Waiting for 6 years, 7 year, 8 year recycle refreshes of standard requirements is simply not fit for purpose when it comes to an SMB.
And I think the other point, just because we've got like 1 minute,
Sure.
One more question, but basically the person retains that
Yes.
change. If they change MSP, they still basically have ownership of whatever changes. And
Absolutely.
moves from
The
there.
certificate still retains, it's in the organization's name.
It's in the organisation's name, so it retains there. And just one quick one, I know, probably got 33 seconds maybe. Thanks, Chloe. Please.
Good morning. Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts. That has been very meaningful. I have been very keenly listening to your ideas, thoughts, and your thoughts that you've been sharing. My thinking would be more around what is the role of government, Australian government, and state government in forming these protocols. And of course, as I heard from Peter mention about paying ransom, like 1 million or more than $1 million, often the threat vectors are most often inspired by funds as money, dollars, and cryptocurrency, but at times it could be more than that. And what is the responsibility that comes back to small businesses as to report back these issues, making a decision where you can, because you're not just an individual, but you're more often seen as an Australian citizen. So where does this responsibility comes down, and how does these agile or dynamic standards take into account these other aspects of nation-state attacks or different forms of attack when it is not just a ransom, but it's more than that?
Okay, I think that question used up all the time, unfortunately, but it's just the government on that point from a federal and state basis. We were talking with Claire O'Neill basically as a health check. She got moved on. There's still continuing conversation, so it may be something the government does, not something that we need to wait for enforcement. I think it's something that we move as a community. As that's done as a majority, I think that changes it. And just one final thought from Ryan before we get kicked off stage by Chloe. Go.
Yeah, so the government is actively involved in on the steering committee as well. We've got state and federal representatives. State, the South Australian government, the Australian Digital Health Agency, Australian Signals Directorate are all involved. So we get feedback from them. And I think with regards to the emerging threats like nation state and all these things, this is all good, but the cold face is that small and medium businesses do not really honestly think about nation state actors. They think about the continuity or the survivability of their business. So we want to get to the fundamental thing. The key goal now is to uplift the entire nation. My hope is that one day, or at least all our hope here is that at least one day, in the next few years, level 1 controls will no longer be needed. And there'll be a new set of level 1, which is the current level 3.
And thank you everyone for joining us, and thank you for giving us a little bit of an extension there. If you've got more questions, we'll hang around the back here and come and see us, and we're happy to answer any more now and any time in the future. But thank you for your time, and please thank the panel.